This is exactly why, if I owned a house, I would never leave it. I said in a past video that waiting for retirement is a bad idea because you might not physically be capable of actually doing the things you want to do or enjoying it to its fullest. Reflecting on it, I see retirement now as just not having to do intensive work on the level of someone my age or anyone below the age of retirement. But this Business Insider article kind of proves that if your body doesn't give out, making you unable to properly enjoy traveling in retirement, inflation is probably going to ruin it first. This from Business Insider. Retirees plan to travel, but it might be too late and too expensive by Kari Becker. Before I get started on that, though, be sure to give this video a like and comment what you really want to do that just can't wait till retirement. Or if you think that if you play your cards right, you can still retire and then do the things you want to do. You let me know in the comments down below. Give this video a like, subscribe for daily videos, and now let's get to the article. Traveling wasn't unusual for Jim Labs, the 72-year-old retiree from the Midwest. As a former regional sales director, Labs spent 65 to 70% of his time on the road in the US and Canada. Later in his career, his partner would join him, but as they approached retirement, they wanted to take it slower and wondered if they could afford to be snowbirds for about 5 months a year in Southern California or Arizona, both states that are almost guaranteed to have warm weather during the winter, he told Business Insider. Fun fact, it has snowed at least once since the founding of the US in all 50 states. Actually, I think I should fact check that. Let's see what our good friend ChatGPT has to say about this. Has it snowed in all 50 states in America at least once since the founding? Let's put 1776. So yeah, Hawaii only in the mountains, so it's nowhere near where anyone lives. And then Florida, they had a couple flurries here and there, and then yeah, we all heard about Texas a couple of years back. So yeah, I just wanted to get that little fact check out of the way. And with that in mind, back to the article. Later in his career, oh right, I read that part. When Labs retired in 2022, they tested the concept for a month, spending roughly $5,000 a day I'm on a 28-day stay at a two-bedroom home, a short walk from Huntington Beach in Southern California. With costs rising each year, the couple has downgraded to cheaper accommodations and reduced their vacation days. He said it hasn't made much of a dent in their travel expenditures. This year, they spent $3,100 for a one-bedroom suite in Phoenix, around 62% of what they spent on accommodation back in 2022, but this time for only a 9-day stay. All right, so they spent 62% of what they. How long did they stay in 2022? Oh, wait, I think it's a reference to the $5,000 for 28 days in Huntington Beach in 2022. Jeez, I would have expected it to be the other way around, where California would have been the more expensive one. Labs isn't alone in having to cut back on travel plans in retirement because of rising costs. Business Insider spoke to several retirees and people planning for retirement who are reconsidering their dream to travel during retirement, whether that's cutting back or scrapping plans altogether. Hey, I'm 28 years old and I've had to cut back on or scrap travel plans altogether. Partially this year was because I heard how not great New York City was, as I said in my video about why traveling is overrated. It can be fun and all, but at the end of the day, travel should really be looked at more as a utility to get from point A to point B to do something you need to get done. In the case of my mother, for the first third of this month, she had to go down to Florida to get my to help my grandparents out because my grandmother kept on struggling with the dizziness that we figured out, and which is why I went to the optometrist after almost 4 years. But getting back on topic, traveling, yeah, it can be fun, but generally it should be to serve a function, or at least that's how it's going to have to be now. And again, I cut back on ideas I had for traveling because inflation and not enough ROI, in my opinion. Now, I have reined in the spending on gaming because of my focus on quality of playthroughs over quantity of just assimilating more games into my library. But I digress. In an AARP survey late last year of Americans who'd expressed an interested, there's a typo there. An interested should be an interest in traveling for pleasure in 2025. About 70% of respondents aged 50 and older said they were planning trips this year. But on average, those respondents weren't expecting to spend more on their trips than they did in 2024, and cost was the most commonly cited travel barrier to them among them. Oh, what do you expect? Things cost money. Labs and his partner have an annual travel budget of around $7,000. He said it can already be a little bit of a challenge to cover their travel budget despite having what he describes as a comfortable but not exorbitant retirement pot and receiving double what the average American gets for Social Security, since he began working young and retired at 69. We're going to live our life, and if we can make it work financially to do a week or two of cold weather to get out of the area, then we'll do that, he said. But travel would be one of the first things to go if they had to tighten up their budget. Obviously, I mean, this is why I personally look at travel as a utility. Traveling for pleasure is really not something you need to do. So, last December, I went to Florida to visit my grandparents. That was strictly because they needed me to set up my grandmother's iPhone that I was donating and the AirPods Pro that she was going to be using as hearing aids going forward that my mom was giving her as an early Christmas present. I had to come because my mom would have had no idea what she was doing. My grandparents, even less so. But me, first of all, I had an extra iPhone lying around because I upgraded to the one that I am recording this video on right now. And two, I actually know what I'm doing. And before I went, since I have the exact same model that has the hearing aid function, I took the hearing test so I could see what needs to be done for setting up the hearing aids. So yeah, there's that. Otherwise, I would not have gone further than my doctor's office is probably the furthest that I go. The furthest that I go for pleasure is going into Boston for other things, because Boston has enough things to offer me that if I really want to go out and do something, I think I'll go there first and then figure it out from there. Because relatively speaking, it either costs T fare or Uber fare. The T, for those of you who don't know, that's the public transit, the MBTA. But enough about that. Let's hear more about the labs and their reduction in travel. Unanticipated volatility. Retirement was going to be Patty Sorrell's chance to travel. What, the company you worked for didn't offer you any vacation time? As a small business owner in Boston, hey, Boston! But okay, that makes a little more sense now. Small business owner kind of can't just get vacation time the same way that a W-2 employee could. It's probably a 1099, not a W-2. Okay, getting back on track. As a small business owner in Boston, she would often work weekends and holidays running her balloon shop so she didn't have time to go on vacation. Whoa, she's like a real life Ellie from Up. I knew I wanted to travel to be part of my life plan, the 62-year-old said. Something that happens when you take your own business is the hustle all the time. And when a job comes along, you take it because you don't know when the next job is going to come along. I can understand that. I'm doing something similar right now. I am recording a bunch of videos before I know that I'm going to be in a position here where I can't record, and because I know that I want to have enough videos ready so that I have what I need for in time for Mission Impossible 8 so that I can take the day I'm seeing that off, at least from this. If I really need to get out of the house early, I'll probably go to a cafe and work on one of my book ideas. As she approached retirement in 2022, she invested in an RV to take more short haul trips across the country. When she fully retired, though, she knew she wanted to travel internationally. Of course, I think everybody would love the fantasy of getting out and being a tourist more than they are, she said. Not all of us can do it. People have financial obligations, familial obligations. I thought I was going to be great, but I'm only pretty good in terms of financials. And that is why a teacher I had in college said to travel when you're young. She said something about how she would do some work and then travel from her home country to other places to experience the cultures and such. Or I forget, this was almost 10 years ago now, but yeah, she made the plans. She went and did her travel when she was, I'm assuming, somewhere a little older than I was at the time. In her 20s, we'll go with that. Obviously, for those of you who are on the dating apps, you know that you occasionally come across the women who brag about the number of countries they've been to, some even posting a flag emoji for each country they've been to, which cool. Hey, you did something you enjoyed. You know what? It does make a little more sense to travel when you're young just because you're actually able to enjoy things and move around to the fullest. So that actually takes me back to a story from 6 years ago next July. Back when I was driving, I actually went up to a beach in Maine to visit my aunt and uncle from upstate New York who were staying there for a longer period of time. I went up there for the day, one of my day trips, not so extreme day trips as I said in that other video, but I went up there, I visited them, I spent the day with them. Uh, I found out they didn't really do as much at the carnival at the carnival there than me because as I did because I was 22 at the time, so therefore I was in a position of I had more energy. I was able to enjoy it. My uncle literally said it's because they were old they didn't go out to the theme park as much. They mostly, really not at all. They went to the beach. I'm pretty sure that the day I came up there was probably the only time they actually went to the the theme park, amusement park. Yeah, amusement park would be more accurate because you can just walk in and out at any time, but you have to buy tickets to redeem for going on rides. Personal anecdote over. Back to the article. More than a year into retirement, her fantasy is colliding with reality. Her travel funds for the next few years, which she describes as her fun money, are in the stock market. That's the stuff I want to make sure doesn't dip or crash, and that's what makes me nervous right now, Sorrell said, referring to the stock market's wild swings in response to changing U.S. policy on tariffs and the war in Ukraine. I can't pull my money out either, because pulling it out when it's down is the worst thing you can do, Sorrell said. I would say buy the dip, but that could be interpreted as financial advice, which that is not, to be clear. To be clear, none of that was financial advice. That was just a sarcastic remark I wanted to make, but also I want to make the point. This is why I don't like the stock market. I'm just going to say it. I am so tired of it being a quantifier of how the economy is doing. Because there's so many dirty tricks that can just be used to pump up the stock market price. Be like, yeah, we have a great company going here, bruh. When really it's probably being propped up by, it's probably being held together by duct tape or something. And don't even get me started on how fiduciary responsibility requires companies to sometimes do things that don't make sense, but not in a cool way, like with all the Apple products that Steve Jobs launched that ended up being major successes despite seeming like a bad idea at the time. For the fact that Disney World and Disneyland sell alcohol at the parks, even though Walt Disney himself was wholeheartedly against it, and for good reason, as you can see with the fights that have broken out. Literally, just look up Disney World fights on YouTube. You'll have hours of footage to watch, and you will see that Walt Disney was completely right about that. And you'll get a taste of what inspired Mike Judge to make the movie Idiocracy. Yeah, that's the thing about the stock market, at least in relation to the businesses. If you want to learn more about how all this works, watch Succession. That's actually how I learned what fiduciary responsibility is. The Swedish guy's offer had to be presented to the board or someone like that because this was in season 3. Uh Mild spoilers for the first half of the show, but Jerry had to present the offer to the board because of a fiduciary responsibility to, quote, make as much money as possible. Shareholders can't handle an occasional dip in quarterly profits. They get too nervous too quickly. They live their life one quarter, just like how Dominic Toretto lives his life a quarter mile at a time. Shareholders tend to live their lives one financial quarter at a time. But anyway, the point is, I am so sick of the stock market. I'm so sick of hearing about it. But I'm not going to say one way or another what to do with investing or not, because this is not an investment channel and nothing I just said is financial advice. Getting back to the article, according to actual financial planners agree that investors shouldn't panic during downturns and exit the market at a loss. In an annual Gallup survey last year, 62% of US adults reported having money invested in the stock market through mutual funds, individual stocks, or retirement funds. And older people hold the vast majority of these equities, which is why Gerber Johnson went on about how Gen Z didn't exactly care much when the stock market collapsed. Elder Gen Z speaking here, as this one guy I went to school with said about pretty much everything. I don't care. I mean, I feel kind of bad for the retirees and their retirement funds. But yeah, younger generations don't have any sort of stake in the stock market. I'm just going to leave it at that. An analysis of Federal Reserve data by Rosenberg Research released last year found that Americans 55 and older own about 80% of the US stock market. Amid the wild market fluctuations this year, many retirees like Sorrell and people nearing retirement are left wondering where they'll be left financially. One of the few things I can cut down on is travel, Sorrell said. I'm not going to cut it out, but I can cut it down. Well, there are ways to cut it down if you ignore the if you ignore the whole if you travel less often, that's a start. If you downgrade the quality of your accommodations, that's also an option. Might not be as viable an option for someone her age compared to, say, someone my age. Like the way my mom cuts down the cost of her visits to my grandparents. She just stays at their place and then sleeps on the couch. She does not need to pay for a hotel when she's there. See, this is why, and this is another reason you should visit family if you're traveling. They might be able to provide you somewhere to stay. Of course, I'd be more inclined to rent a hotel room so that I can do my own thing, so that I can operate on my terms. Like when I went to upstate New York last year, I paid to have a hotel room all to myself. I learned from when I went there in 2018. I prefer having a hotel room to myself, and I will spare no expense to make that happen. I'll go full John Hammond here. Jake Falcon, the founder of Falcon Wealth Advisors, said that people who need money for bills, living expenses, or travel in the next 5 to 10 years should avoid parking that money in the stock market because volatility could affect those short term goals. He added that people shouldn't get too frustrated by the current economic environment because it will inevitably change. For retirees who are feeling stretched but still want to travel, he recommended getting creative and looking off the beaten path. Exactly, though that's more of a young person thing for travel, mostly because we don't have the same needs that older people might have. Off the beaten path. Jeff Mayernick and his wife Sandra, who both worked in real estate until 2023 and 2024, respectively, did just that when health issues prompted them to examine the age at which they could retire. When doing the math and looking at savings, home equity, and future Social Security income, they discovered that at 59, they could retire within a year. Still, it came with a catch. They wouldn't be retiring in a fixed place. There are 100 countries where we can stay 90 days at a time, so let's go see them, Jeff, 61, said. We put together a plan, sold everything we owned, and hit the road with a couple of backpacks and a little suitcase. The couple sold all their belongings in a 5-acre property in Oregon, which included 3 outbuildings. They set a spending target of around $40,000 a year, which includes all travel expenses, as well as general expenditures such as insurance and cell phone costs. Year 1, we went over budget, Sandra, 61, said. Year 2, we'll build closer. We've learned some things, obviously, but it was less expensive than just living in a place somewhere in Oregon and not traveling. They decide which country to visit next based on affordability. We looked at Italy and went, yeah, not this year for sure, Jeff said. And so we put 2 months in Albania because the weather is similar and it's a lot less expensive to rent a place for 2 months than it would be literally anywhere in Italy. Fun fact, that's the country where Voldemort was hiding between Halloween of 1981 and when Quirrell found him. I just wanted to throw that out there because I'm a Harry Potter fan. But also, I want to say this is a very creative way to still travel while being in retirement. The problem, though, is um, you're again, elderly people have different needs that someone my age isn't going to have, or is far less likely to have. On average, older people are going to have more mobility issues, so I don't know if this is a viable idea. The whole point of retirement is so that someone with mobility issues, like my grandfather who has to use a walker to get around, yeah, that kind of situation is what retirement's for, not for being able to, not for a lot of other reasons. It's not really for traveling. I mean, if you go somewhere, cool. But also, at a certain point, traveling is going to be far less manageable when you're older. And that's why you should have a fixed place to settle down if you are elderly. Hey, don't look at me. It's just biology, then. This is just biology. People get older. Mobility issues kick in. This is why young people typically travel more, and then they travel less as they get older because, one, it gets more expensive, and two, mobility issues. Again, I mean, if you're spry and able to get around, cool. But again, retirement, it's mostly for situations like my grandfather who has to get around in a walker because he has mobility issues. That is what retirement is primarily for. Anyway, getting back to the article, just said they plan to travel for at least 2 years before committing to a place to retire permanently, somewhere with a reasonable cost of living. I hear the Philippines is like that, according to all the passport bros. There are any passport bros out there who have actually been out there? Drop a comment if you think the Philippines might be the place to retire, or if the internet's wrong about that, please let me know now so I don't consider doing that. I mean, yeah, the Philippines seems like a cool place according to all the passport bros, but there's always more than meets the eye. Anyway, back to the article. Carrie LeMay, a 58-year-old corporate marketing executive, quit her job to travel the world with her retired partner Bill, who is 70. They rely on their savings, investments, and income from a travel blog to fund trips, but increasing costs are eating away at their travel budget. They're now downsizing to continue funding their trips by selling their 5 bedroom house in Minnesota to buy a 1 bedroom condo instead. My insurance is going up. My taxes are going up. Therefore, my mortgage payment, because it includes those things, is going up. And we're not even here that much, LeMay said. This is exactly why, if I owned a house, I would never leave it. I would literally just get everything delivered and like walk around the outdoor parts of it for exercise and sunshine. Because I'm trying to do a walk first thing every morning, which I'm able to do on the sidewalks. I don't want to say too much more about it, but I am trying to get outside more often and do that. But again, if I owned a house, I would probably never leave it because the way the housing market is now, it costs so much that I would have to have a work from home job just to even consider buying a house. Or even if I had to move out and start paying rent somewhere, if I had to pay rent or mortgage or property taxes, I would almost never leave the house just because of that. Anyway, getting back to the article, both LeMay and the Mayor Nix run monetized travel blogs, Achieve Your Bucket List and The Mobile Retiree, respectively. LeMay hopes her earnings from the blog will provide her with additional funds to travel for longer, especially since her retirement fund isn't as large as her partner's. Uh, wouldn't they have a shared retirement fund if they're married? Who knows? Having an income during retirement is one of the best things retirees who want to travel extensively can do, said William Gogolak, an assistant professor of finance at Carnegie Mellon University, who teaches courses on financial investing and analysis. Those in their 40s or 50s who are planning to travel in retirement should start thinking about a part of their career they might be able to parlay into consulting work later in life, he said. So basically, it might make more sense to just reduce your workload if you can and then start traveling. Like the uncle I was talking about earlier, he went on He's probably been on more trips during my lifetime than I ever have it up to this point. I'm not talking about just coming here to the greater Boston area from upstate New York. There's the beach in Maine that I mentioned earlier, and generally traveling around more places than that. I'm just going to leave it at that for now. But again, if I have to pay my own housing costs, I am leaving the house as that housing as little as possible, if at all. Now or never. Some people nearing retirement age have begun to shift or delay their travel plans as they examine their finances more closely. Suki Eleuterio and her partner, who initially bonded over their love of travel, have viewed their 401ks as their ticket to traveling the world once their two children, both under the age of 10, have flown the nest. Yeah, with housing costs these days, good luck on them flying the nest in, let's say 15 years, 15 to 20 years. Good luck seeing them fly the nest. Or if they're still living with you, maybe you can be like, okay, you're adults. We can trust you with the place. I mean, that would probably make some sense. Anyway, getting back to the article. Will we just be forced to keep working and working to pay off all the bills? I would not be surprised if that's unfortunately more of the case. Sorry to get a little grim, but it's probably going to be that way unless you get really creative. Or at a certain point, you're just going to have to accept traveling is going to cost money. You can either pay the price or save traveling for when you need to and accept that you will not be able to travel for pleasure if you don't want to spend that money. There's always a trade off. The only way I'm probably ever gonna go back to my grandparents' place in Florida is if they need me to do something that literally no one else they know can. Technically, someone could have set up my grandmother's new iPhone, new to her that is, and the AirPods Pro. But again, I have the exact same model here, so I was able to actually test the process and know what to do. My mom might have been able to figure it out, just not as well as I could have. Because I spend so much time watching YouTube videos about tech products and such. A little insight into my personal viewing habits. Traveling with kids, there's an article that we might be able to read and react to later. It's very different than traveling as a couple, Eleuterio said. We tried to do the Disney thing a few years ago. That was very stressful. I did not feel that that was an adequate vacation for us as a couple. But I think the kids had a wonderful time. Uh, being the parents, I think the priority for that was for the sake of the kids. Basically, Disney World is for kids and Disney adults, and adults who enjoy Disney but aren't Disney adults, like those kind of Disney adults, like the Meat Canyon kind of Disney adults. I'm no Disney adult, but I enjoy Disney movies. Not a lot of the newer ones from recent years, but I'll take the W where I can, like with Thunderbolts. That was a Disney production. I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to when we can also just travel just the two of us again, she said. Eleuterio and her partner are both in their 40s and envisioned island hopping in the Caribbean and eating like locals in Europe in their 60s, following in the footsteps of her partner's grandparents, who were big travelers and did much of the same as they got older. Yet, getting to check places off their travel wish list hanging on a wall in their home feels further and further away. The couple has just a little nest egg after they used a large portion of their savings to buy a house in 2022 after nearly 2 decades of renting. That, combined with her partner losing their job late last year, means they're spending more cautiously and saving less. As their debt creeps up and the future of Social Security in doubt, Eleuterio said they wonder what their retirement will actually look like. Will we just be forced to keep working and working to pay off all the bills? Unfortunately, probably yes. I mean, home buying isn't really something I would particularly do if I were interested in traveling. I would probably rent and keep my material possessions to a minimum so that I could move freely and not be as tied down. Homeownership seems more like the kind of thing for when you settle down, you don't want to have to be moving this way, that way, and every other way. Especially if you're choosing to have children. Let's wrap up this article. As a result, the age at which they plan to retire keeps getting pushed back. Eleuterio said, retiring in their late 50s or early 60s doesn't feel as attainable as it might have 10 years ago. It makes me think about maybe we should travel now a little bit and get some of those things checked off our bucket list now, even if we do it with kids, Eleuterio said. What if it's actually about living your life now versus living your life later? First of all, if you're able to make traveling with your kids work, go for it. Give them the experience as well. Don't just hoard it all to yourself. I mean, yeah, traveling with kids is going to be a pain. I personally didn't travel much as a kid. I can count on one hand the number of times I went on an airplane before I turned 18. No, wait, it was 7 times total. But my family took day trips. We went places that were fun. that were memorable. We ne- Beyond the 2 times that I went to Disney World, as a family, my parents, siblings, and I never actually went anywhere as exciting as some of the places that our classmates went to. I don't think any of us left the country until, well, my sister went on a school sponsored Europe trip in 20. I don't remember when, but while she was still in high school and they had that trip, she went on that trip. So I think between her, my brother, and I, she was the only one to go outside of the country before turning 18. I know for a fact my mom didn't leave the country until she was 50. Well, on that note, I'm going to leave it here for the video. You let me know in the comments whether you would rather travel now, even if you have to keep working past the age of retirement, or if you'd rather wait until retirement and see how it pans out. Because if you travel now, at the very least, you'll be able to actually enjoy it to the fullest. You won't have to worry about mobility issues. You'll be able to take advantage of you'll be able to cope with the poorer conditions of budget accommodations better than when you're older and either used to a certain standard of living or your joints are just in too much pain to be able to cope with it. But if you wait till you're older, as you saw in this article, inflation is probably going to ruin it anyway. But I want to hear what you have to say. You let me know in the comments down below which you would choose and why. Give this video a like, subscribe for daily videos, and I'll see you soon.